within this game as well, Ryan Williams looked awesome again, but that defense looked so bad.
Yeah.
It was not a good look for your team, Ty.
My take when it comes to it is, after being able to digress, I'm more happy for Vanderbilt than I am mad about Alabama. The only highlight, like you said, was Ryan Williams. Other than that, that defense looked terrible. The D-line just got outplayed. They were able to run the ball. Diego Pavia had 250 yards touchdown. Cedric Alexander, he had 2 tutties. And again, like I said, Bama never led, and that was the thing. And they tried coming back at that last quarter. Milroe threw an interception. He's now, I think, tanked in the Heisman now. Well,
Oh, yeah.
Especially because Jency's now just being the running back he is. So, am I worried about said Alabama in the ranking? No, honestly, because I mean, this is a new college football when it comes to it. Alabama, with a one-loss team, they're going to go back. But just reviewing the tape, was not ugly. I mean, it was pretty ugly, especially what Kalen DeBoer wore. It was like more of a Walmart type shirt.
I need to get into this with y'all. It is not that big of a deal what shirt your coach wears. I'm sorry. It has never been that big of a deal. Mike Gundy has worn rain ponchos to the games and wears the overall sweated hoodie every game.
Yeah, I mean,
And he wins games every year. I get that it's Alabama and it's Nick Saban. He's not going to be Nick Saban. He will never be Nick Saban. We need to stop comparing him to Nick Saban. He has his own style of coaching, which just got him into the national championship. I'm not pretty sure everybody at Washington didn't care what he wore because he got him to a natty.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Obviously, I don't care what any coach would wear. I mean, I'd be fine with just a t-shirt and a visor type guy. But I mean, good God, I mean, you go from that Georgia performance and now you're going to Vanderbilt. That was not it.
No,
not it.
but your expectations have been raised so beyond every other fan
yeah,
base.
when
And
they
so
beat-
it becomes now of like, oh, we need to nitpick all the little things. It's like, guys, the fact that your defense sucked had nothing to do with him wearing a long sleeve shirt.
Well, I mean, when Bama's last loss like this was Georgia Southern in 2011, and well, I was 6 at the time. There's new things. I mean, honestly, looking forward into this is going to be a game that I'll always talk about, just because everyone's game before then it was Bama losing to Georgia Southern. Like, that was the worst game I've ever seen. This is one of them. This is going to be one of them now that I can actually talk about. And, I'm not even going to talk bad about Bama or saying, like, they got robbed or anything. Just props to Vandy. I mean, I'm proud for Vandy, happy for them. Always been happy for them. Even when they got the double overtime versus Missouri, was happy for them. So,
Do you know who we need to really shout out and be happy for?
who's that?
A&M fans.
Yeah.
Texas A&M is good, man.
They are.
They're very good at this point. Shout out to their running back Le'Veon Moss. 12 carries, 138 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He
that was the only thing I
tore
was gonna say.
apart Missouri in that game. And it became such a lopsided game so early on. I mean, at halftime, it was 24-0.
Yeah.
So by the end of the third quarter, it was 34-7. Right. Like this game was well over before halftime even. But Connor Weigman played in exactly his role. Le'Veon Moss was awesome. I think that they have a real chance here. If I need to see the rest of their schedule, see how it plays out.
Me
but
too.
I think they have a pretty okay path if they win a couple more games to make a college football playoff run. In the first year of Mike Elko, which that dude's a great coach. I was just wondering if he would have the talent right away behind it, and obviously he does. So
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, there's not much I can say besides Connor Wingman. He had a perfect game, even though he had 0 touchdowns. Le'Veon Moss, he had 173 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then Amari Dials, he had 2 tutties. It was a perfect game just for running when it came to A&M, and just Missouri has kind of struggled against the run, especially when Vanderbilt got him to the double overtime, and A&M just took over, and that was really all it said. And yeah, 41-10 win. That's exactly what A&M needs, especially to show that they're back.
So I want to play a scenario out here for you.
Go.
The rest of Texas A&M schedule: Mississippi State win.
Win.
LSU at home is going to be a tough one, but I could see them winning that game.
I see a loss.
South Carolina, most likely a
I see
win. New Mexico State, obviously a win. At Auburn, most likely a win.
Most likely a win.
Which means that we're in the toss-up if they beat the LSU team of having, and again, we'd have to play the other scenario of this as well, Texas being a one-loss team, playing that final week for a spot in the SEC championship. Texas A&M is playing each other.
You have Texas losing to Georgia?
I would assume they either lose to Georgia or they lose in a Red River game this weekend.
That's fair.
But I just think that it would be a one-loss scenario, and I feel like that would be to get into the SEC championship game, and that would be must-see TV right away.
It's gonna be interesting because I know these all these records are showing in the ranks, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Bama is gonna do this or whatever." But it's just like everyone's pretty much a one loss besides Texas in the SEC.
Yeah.
So
It's
a fair
and
game.
it's going to come down to really who can string out the most successful second half of the season. Because you're right, everybody at this point is at one loss or more that we really thought that could compete outside of Texas. So if Texas drops one to, let's say, Georgia, then they're going to have a real issue being back in that mix. Now, could they guarantee themselves and just go undefeated the rest of the regular season? Probably. But also then you're running into A&M at the end of the year, and I think that they're going to be a team that gets better with the year and having more experience in the offense that they're building around.
Me too.
A game shout out that I picked. Sadly, our last week episode was not able to be posted. We had some technical difficulties on everything, but we did do a segment. Our question of the week was who were our upsets, and we went 2 for 2, man.
We went 2 for 2.
That's not too
I'll say
bad.
that.
SMU beating Louisville 34-27. I was happy about this game for a couple of reasons. Number one, it makes me not feel as bad about my ACC pick for the championship game, and number two, SMU's a real team this year, man, and I like to see a team that hasn't really been had their shine, has been annexed from college football at this point, and that's stuff that happened, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago at this point, be able to be relevant and be a top 25 team.
I mean, honestly, it was kind of flipped on my end just because Louisville was my ACC pick in the championship, and now that's kind of out the window considering how Clemson and Miami have been. But, I mean, both of these teams played really well. It was just who was going to turn the ball over first, and, well, Tyler Shuck did that. Even though he played really great.
He did have a really good game.
They had a really great game. They just, that one turnover killed
You know,
them.
one of my favorite players when I went back and watched this game and saw all of the highlights from it was Ja'Cory Brooks. He only had 3 catches, 121 yards, 2 touchdowns, was awesome. They ran the ball well. I mean, so did SMU, though, and that I think that was the big scare for me right now is how is Louisville's defense going to show up, and it didn't show up well. Kevin Jennings, the starting quarterback at SMU, 21 of 27, 281 yards, no picks, no touchdowns, but when you run for as many as you had, like, it just ends up working out for you, and the math game wins.
That was the only thing I really worried about when picking Louisville for the ACC, and, well, it kind of bit me in the dust right there.
Yeah.
So.
And hey, man, this was the absolute week for upsets.
This
I
included
don't want to
one.
get into this next game quite yet. I just want to talk about the state of college football. It was supposed to be the easy week, man, building up to the big week of all of the big games. And here we are, and I'm looking at probably 13 games that we could have talked about. And I think it's exactly why we love college football.
Yeah.
The unexpected, the unknown, the inability to just say, all right, this is what's going to happen. And it's unlike any other league, because that's true in the NFL to some degree. But you don't see it anywhere else
don't
where
see it
you're
a
going to see
lot.
a Vanderbilt and beat Alabama. You're going to see all of these other upsets that happen later on. And it was such a fun week to go through night after night after night. And I mean, a game that we're not even, I mean, we get to later on, but Miami versus Cal, like, it was such a great weekend for
so
college football.
unexpected.
And it makes you so excited for the weekend that's to come because there are still so many games that are lined up for this that are going to be really, really top tier.
Well, that and how you mentioned when we first started this, like everything is new, and like all these games that we thought, because we said last week on the episode when it did not air that this was more of the weakest link when it came to it, and almost all these schools they now have historic games that
Yep.
they can talk about for the rest of their lives,
Exactly.
and we are now all just experiencing it. So,
Speaking of a team that's going to be really happy about their success, row that boat up in Minnesota, baby. PJ Fleck beating USC in USC, right? I'm
No,
pretty. Oh, it was in Minnesota. Yeah, you're
'cause
right.
They stormed the field.
Yes, you're right. You're right. You're right. 24-17. First off, Minnesota has very underrated jerseys.
They really
Like
do.
very underrated
I don't know
maroon
why.
and gold
Minnesota's always
jerseys.
just been my like personal fave when I see them getting upset. I'm like, good for them.
Hey man,
Like,
cold like Minnesota, you can't be too mad about it. I think that there's so much talent in the Big 12, or not the Big 12, excuse me,
Big 10.
the Big 10 and the SEC. I really am going to be curious who comes out from these two divisions because we're looking at an Illinois team, let's say, or a Nebraska team that we think is pretty good. But are they anywhere close to a
But then
Ohio
when you
State,
think-
Oregon?
When you think there's a Ohio State, there's an Oregon, there was a USC, now there's a Minnesota now that's actually making a
Yep.
presence. Like every team now in every conference is making a presence, and this is what you love to see. Miller Moss though just did not look great.
He had the 2 interceptions. They tried to throw the ball a lot when they were up there. They actually were able to run the ball pretty well.
Yeah.
Jaquavius Marks, 20 carries, 134 yards, and a touchdown. That's pretty effective, especially for a USC offense. The group that I really wanted to highlight in this was Minnesota's defense. Like
Yeah,
they
no,
were
killing
this
it.
was not a game of Minnesota USC getting it handed to them. Minnesota was opportunistic. They played really, really good down the stretch. The third down efficiency numbers were really skewed. It's hilarious to look at in the box press. 7 for 11 for SC, 2 for 8 for Minnesota. And then you look at the total punts and everything else. Oh, that's pretty even and everything else. The penalties are what killed USC in this game, and the defense was opportunistic for Minnesota, and that's why they got the win in this one.
It'll be interesting to see just how USC is able to come back from that. I mean, I don't. At first, they were kind of starting off hot, and then now they're just.
And they'll get
Now
better
they-
with time, I think. I think the biggest thing right now for them is figuring out this whole new look of a team. You got to remember, this is a team that lost so many seniors, and so it was cool for them to look that
Especially
good
their
early
high
on. Yeah, it was that good for them to look that good early on, but it wasn't expected. There's a lot of
I didn't
expectation for
expect
them to
much
drop
from
back.
them to go and make a run. But
Exactly.
I was just hoping at least it'd be more.
But hey, I think when we're talking about these games in here, we have still 2 that we have to get to, but we do not have the time for it right now. When we get back, we're going to go ahead and preview into those 2 games that we missed: Arkansas, Tennessee, Miami, and Cal. And then we're going to preview some of the biggest games going on: OU, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, and a whole lot more that I'm really, really excited for. So
good to me.
we'll be right back after this.
There's our intro.
Welcome back to AFR.
We're back, baby.
Hey, man, technical difficulties aside, we got to enjoy talking about sports, right?
We really do.
Everything aside, everything that's going on,
I
you
can
got to enjoy
complain
talking about
and
sports.
complain and say a lot of things right now, but right. I mean, I get to talk about Arkansas versus Tennessee of all things.
Hey,
so.
and a whoa pig suey. Shout out Steve Spears for teaching me how to do that correctly. The Little Rock native.
All I gotta say is Taylor Green's a stud.
He is a stud, and I've loved him ever since he came here. He's like my new favorite crush in the entirety of college football. And I don't think I don't know if he's gonna be an NFL talent type guy. I think he has the talent though, does he not? Like he's
got the
big.
running ability. He has the height. He's got the size. He's got the throw. He just needs to get a better throwing when it comes to accuracy.
And I mean, he's inaccurate right now, but you can't tell me that Anthony Richardson, who yes is a more athletic talent than him, Anthony Richardson, who's completing about 50% of his passes in the NFL, that dude doesn't have a spot to play in the NFL.
He's
He's
got to at least
awesome.
have a backup.
Oh,
Or
yeah,
at least be able to be
1,000%.
part of like some mobile offense. But I mean, he was 14 for 19, 266 yards. Jaquarion Johnson, he had 20 carries, a touchdown. Dylan Sampson, for Arkansas, he was the only thing they had. I mean, not for Arkansas. I'm sorry, Tennessee. He had 151 yards, 2 tutties.
Yeah.
Just Nico and that offense were not able to pass the ball, so they just had to run it. And honestly, the run had to go on that last play, and it was kind of shades of when they played against. I think it was Ole Miss when that happened too. I don't know which Tennessee game it was, but it ended that same way.
I think it was very similar to that. Some of the notes that I have from the Arkansas side of things. Taylor Green was ineffective running the ball this game. He was actually 9 rushes for -5 yards, which I think was a massive thing for Tennessee to take away, and I thought would have made the big difference here. It is not a good day for me to be the Nico stan that I am, but I still will be standing behind it and say, all right, this is the what is this now, 6th start of his career?
Yeah.
And it's the first time I've genuinely felt like, okay, you could have really played better and secured a win that you should have won.
And I would think even like
It's going to happen.
I would think even for Nico's sake, this was kind of like his first test because whenever he played OU, they were at that time they were more focused on who's the quarterback going to be, and now he had like an actual team and there was an actual great quarterback in Taylor Green. Also, he about his kneecaps about died.
Yes.
And so for him to sit out for 2 plays and then come back and then pull off the upset, great win for Arkansas.
Yep. Jaquindon Jackson had a touchdown. Malachi Singleton had a touchdown. It was an awesome game. And I'm going to tell you right now as well, the other guy that I'm in love with on their team is a guy named Andrew Armstrong.
Yeah.
The big. They have him listed at 6'4". He's not 6'4". I watched him when he played here. He is all of 6'6".
Yeah,
he is a
looks 6'6".
massive human being. And I think that his ability to cut and run routes still is phenomenal for a guy his size. He shouldn't be able to move like he does, but he's small enough out. They're not small enough, but he's lanky enough out there and mobile enough that he can make it happen. And I think that Arkansas team can be really dangerous for the first time in, 10 years. Yeah. It's been a long time since we've seen a really good Arkansas team, but I think with, again, how much is new, how much mix-up everything's happening, I think it's a real possibility.
And it's just because, Arkansas, the past 2 years, they have started off strong in the first 2 quarters, and then once it goes to the second half, they weren't able to finish. And so now they were actually had a full 4 quarters where they was just domination and were able to stay consistent. So, again, another huge win for Tennessee, and it just opens up the SEC a lot more. Yeah. So,
what if I told you that through all of the games we just talked about, all of the things that just happened, everything that we just talked about, none of them were the best game from Saturday?
It was not. Miami versus Cal was
Miami versus Cal. And hey, you want to talk about a group showing up for College Game Day? Cal did a phenomenal job being there for College Game Day. The most signs I think I've ever seen at Game Day. And, the team showed up for 3 quarters.
3 quarters.
And they were almost there. They walked into the 4th quarter being up 35 to, let me make sure I have this correct, 35-18. They go 21-3 in the 4th quarter for Miami. Cam Ward goes ballistic. He had 53 throw attempts in this one, 35 completions, 437 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. The pick was ugly, of course, but oh my God, that offense is explosive. And they came back in the end of it and won it, but it was an incredible atmosphere and probably one of my favorite games I've watched in a long time.
My funniest part is just whenever we went into this game, obviously we were just making a lot of jokes about how game day was and how the fans were. We saw this game at first and we were like, oh, this game's over with. Cal's going to pull off the upset here. Miami's done. And then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, they're back.
Yeah.
They came back. I immediately go back to my team. I was like, what happened?
Yeah, and you all of a sudden are just like, wait, what's happening with this team? Yeah. I think the guy that I really want to shout out in this game was Xavier Restrepo, the wide receiver for Miami. 7 catches, 163 yards. Obviously no touchdowns in there, but oh my God, what an explosive athlete for a guy that is, he reminds me so much of like a Julian Edelman type, and then I watch him go deep on somebody. And it's like, wait, that doesn't add up together. So I think that he's going to be a really cool piece here in a year for some NFL team that wants to use him.
Mine was Cam Ward, and then Damian Martinez. He had a touchdown of his own. And then, like you mentioned, Cam Ward, he had 437 yards, 53 attempps. Other side, Jaden Ott, he had 2 touchdowns.
Dude, this is what's getting really curious to me here. He only had the 1 touchdown in this game, and he only had 7 carries.
Yeah,
he's hurting, but like if he's hurt, then don't play him. But if he isn't, then play him. I don't know. They had no ability to run the ball other than one big run by a guy named Jonathan Bradley.
I think they may have thought that the game was already over and they didn't want to risk it, and then ended up Miami came back, so they're like, oh shoot.
Yeah, and I get some of that, but you have to be
You
able to
have
run the
to- you
ball
have to
in
be
some
smart
degree.
with
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Especially when it's that type of guy that can be a Pac-12 first team all player. Like there are certain levels to players that you sit out and sit in. If it's a guy that you think could be an impact for the rest of your season, you probably keep him out.
What's crazy is we've gone through segment 1 and now segment 1 like in the half, and that was all last week.
And that was all last week, but we still have a massive week to talk to you about. And we're going to go ahead and start it off with one of my favorite games that we're going to talk about, the Red River Rivalry. Oklahoma playing against number 1 Texas.
This is the game.
Quinn Ewers is expected to be back and playing for Texas in this game.
I need your thoughts.
I'm sorry to our awesome cameraman Colt, who is here helping us today.
He didn't even know he was going to be a camera
I know,
guy.
but he showed up and he's doing a phenomenal job.
We were able to do a shot of Colt.
If we could, we would, but I think this is going to get really ugly really fast. If we thought that Tennessee game was like not a good look for OU and their program and not having an offense, I think this Texas defense is going to be a really big problem for them. And if that's not the problem, here's the other thing that I was saying before this. I think they're starting the 4th best quarterback in this game.
Okay.
I think that it goes...
So we're going back to this.
Oh, I'm going back to this because I think it is a big point enough that I can make here. I think that Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning are better than anything that Oklahoma has. And I hate to say it, but those two guys are phenomenal, and they're going to be high-level draft picks, whereas I don't know about the other two. I then think Jackson Arnold, as I've made clear on this show multiple times, is the best quarterback at OU. So Michael Hawkins now sits as the 4th best quarterback in this game. And you're going to tell me that I need to find a way to make that guy win the game. I don't see it. Give me Texas by a lot.
My thought about this is I think it's going to be a little bit closer than what most people are expecting. I know a lot of people say Texas is going to blow them by 30. I think it's going to be more of like a 17-24 game, just solely because OU's still trying to figure out that offense. They're dealing with injuries right now. Texas is just the more complete team. They have everything they need and want. And I just think for OU to even have a shot, they're gonna have to score every other drive.
Yeah.
And they just have not been able to do that. Give me Texas by 14.
And they're going to have to be able to run the ball, which basically nobody has been able to do on Texas to start this year.
And the only person that's been able to have a decent running game is Hawkins.
Yeah, and they still. I mean, I'll be really curious to see, but I don't foresee that happening, especially with some of the injuries that OU is dealing with right now. I think that's also the biggest hindrance here: losing your top 2 playmakers on the outside and having some defensive players that are game time decisions and stuff like that does not help when you're playing the number 1 team in the country.
For sure. It'll just be interesting to see the transition from OU and Texas, and then going from Texas to Georgia the next week.
I'm going to make a statement here right now. I think this next game is going to decide who's next week's number 1 overall team is going to be.
Okay.
Because I don't think there's a way the committee, in the way that they've set this up, is going to say the 2-3 matchup doesn't decide who goes up a spot.
This should be who's number 1.
Exactly. So it's going to be Ohio State versus Oregon in Autzen. It is the biggest game in Autzen
The
ever.
only exception I'd be is if Texas just wipes OU.
Oh, yeah. There'd be some conversation for that then. But I also think that this is going to be a massive game to decide this.
Me too.
Oregon is playing Ohio State. Will Howard versus Dylan Gabriel. How ironic is that? The Big 12 matchup of last year, OU
12.
versus K-State, and now we have it for the 2 and 3 teams in the nation.
This is gonna be really interesting.
Who do you have?
Me personally, I have Ohio State. I think this is going to be the time where everyone in the world starts to figure out who Jeremiah Smith is, even though they already have. I think he's going to get that talk to where he's the best freshman wide receiver. I think he's going to make the big plays, especially when you have guys. I'm more interested to see how Caleb Downs is going to and Jabbar Muhammad are going to be. I think those two guys are going to be key players when it comes to it. Other than that, give me Ohio State by 10.
I like that pick, but I also am going to have to sway from you on that one. I have
picking
Oregon
Oregon?
winning this game. I do.
See, I just think Oregon's been struggling a little too much.
Okay, that's fair. There's 2 things that are huge in this game. Number 1, it's at home. It's a long travel distance that's going to be for Ohio State, something that they're not really used to in the Big 12. The farthest they have to travel is Maryland, which is a decent drive, but not even close to Oregon. Number 2, if I come down to, yes, Jeremiah Smith is awesome, and I think he's probably the best freshman receiver right there with Ryan Williams, but who's the best receiver in college football? I can make a huge argument that that's close to Evan Stewart or Tez Johnson. 2 guys that are phenomenal on the outside for Oregon. I think the Ducks are going to be able to play this game and hang in there with Ohio State. I don't think it's going to be anything big, but I do have Oregon winning by 3.
I'm also, that's the thing when it comes to it. We talked about like the first episode. I expect Ohio State to be undefeated just because they have bought this team.
Yeah, and I mean,
And
they
so
should.
I expect them to beat Oregon in this situation because of all the talent they have with a Judkins, a Will Howard. They have Caleb Downs now. They have all these players they need.
Do you know what I worry about with this game?
What's that?
Every time that not every time, I shouldn't say, but almost every time that Ryan Day has been tested in a top 5 matchup, in a big rivalry game, in a big college football playoff game, he falls flat on his face.
And again, I have said, like I said in the first episode, if he's not able to do that this year,
he's done.
He's done. He's
Exactly.
gotta be out of here.
And so I think that this is probably their big first test on that, and they're still going to play Michigan later this year, which I think we're both going to end up picking Ohio State. But I just think that this Oregon team, who has been figuring it out as they go, went to UCLA last week and blew them out. Like, I think that they're getting better as time goes on.
Some notable games we have throughout the other week.
Go quick
that we're
on
not
these
gonna be able
guys.
to talk about. We got Colorado versus K-State.
Give me Colorado, sadly.
Man, the switch up has
I
happened.
really hate to do it, but I think that they're actually a pretty decent team, which is
Switch
annoying.
up has officially happened. Next
yeah.
one we have Arizona State versus Utah, which
me the Utes.
we heard today that Cam Rising will be starting.
Yep, give me the
Also
Utes.
give me the Utes.
Who you got? Ole Miss, LSU.
I got Ole Miss.
All right, I got Ole Miss as well. On the other side of the break, we're going to get to the big boys in the NFL, and we're going to talk about the NFL and our 3 Ws right after this.
We would design something, it was set on the counter, and people was either, if enough of them said, this isn't it never made to the line. Dad was excited that they're all original. They were all designed on Mom's kitchen table, and it gets in your blood after a while.
We're very happy that Pamela and Michael have taken over the business and kept the family going.
We took the business over in 2017. When we found that it was available, we wanted to keep the legacy of family alive, but it was also incredible products that deserved to be a part of Made in Oklahoma's story. We were a part of Made in Oklahoma years ago, and so it kind of grew as Made in Oklahoma grew.
Oklahoma is ingrained into our everything that we did. We've been here most of our life. That's what we entailed our whole business on, was the Oklahoma homegrown feeling.
Welcome back, guys.
Welcome back.
As we always do, second half of the show, get to the big boys on Sunday. Some of the best games that we saw. And again, we talked about this throughout the week, and I kind of have to share some of our tea on what we were talking about with this game. It was really funny because after Saturday, we're like, oh, this is going to be a college football-centric show.
Yeah.
And then Sunday happened.
Sunday
And
was
then we
interesting.
had a lot of really, really good games. And as we always do with the NFL for the most part at this point, we have our 3 Ws because we don't have the ability to go over the entire NFL. So we wanted to highlight the who, the what, and the where that we cared about the most from this week. I believe we have Ty's graphic loaded up the first one, so we'll go ahead and show that.
So for my who, I have none other than big Kirko Cousins. You know, another historic performance, 500 yards, and was able to get another primetime win. My other one's going to be the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix having a clear,
My
perfect
donkeys.
game. And other than that, I have not talked about this team for a while, so I'm going to be positive. The New York Giants finally got a dominant win against the Seattle Seahawks. You know what? Good for them. I haven't talked about the Giants or anybody this entire week because I just assumed they were number 1 pick contention. And look at them. Daniel Jones actually played well.
So I have to bring up something that I'm going to credit to Chris Long on this, on the Giants one. Have you noticed that teams that play the Detroit Lions the week after are terrible?
Yeah.
They are 0-5 this year.
Well, probably 'cause they're banged up.
Exactly. It's the Dan Campbell effect, and the Seattle Seahawks just had the same thing. So I'd like to give him as much credit as I can. There was also a blocked kick in that game.
Yeah.
Isaiah Simmons is an athletic freak.
Did
I
you
love
see
him.
the way he did it?
Oh my God, it
It
was
is
insane.
satisfying.
It reminded me so much of Cam Chancellor a couple years ago when he got flagged for it like twice, and he just kept doing it.
Cam Chancellor would jump over the center. This guy would just maneuvered his way in the most.
He kind of jumped him. He didn't clear him, but he jumped him.
I don't know what the actual thing was. I think the nose tackle just kind of did more of a chop to the.
No, yeah, he kinda
center,
held him
and
down.
he was just able to just jump and maneuver through the A gap. But it was satisfying still because I miss those type. I miss seeing guys like Cam Chance or Dante Hightower jumping over the center and blocking the kick. It's the most satisfying thing ever. And I miss when Troy Polamalu. Actually, no, I hated when Troy Polamalu hit the C gap. That was stupid.
Shut up, Pat
Shout out
McAfee
Pat
for that
McAfee.
one. Yep. I think one of the things that I want to highlight with your 3 Ws, Kirk Cousins, man. 509 yards, 4 touchdowns. The 1 interception was bad, but that was also a desperation throw on 4th and 13, 4th and 14.
I don't get
so
it with him. The first half, every primetime game I've seen, it's just put Penix in. He's terrible. Kirk Cousins is just whatever. And then the second half, it's just oh, he has 500 yards.
he's kind of shaken the whole not primetime anymore because the
really
Falcons have had so many primetime games that they've won by 1 point or 1 possession at this point. Tampa Bay still played pretty well. Baker Mayfield looked very good on limited attempts for them. I think the biggest thing that they need for their identity in Tampa Bay right now is figuring out how to stop a nosebleed. Because Kirk Cousins in that offense is good. Don't get me wrong. They have a lot of good pieces. But my God, you should not be giving up 500 yards to Kirk Cousins on Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, there's no way you allow that happen. Especially when literally 2 years prior, they would barely give up 300 total yards.
That team has lost so many pieces for their defense, but I do still believe that they could be a really good defense on that team. But can we talk a little bit about my donkeys?
Yeah.
Can we be a little bit excited about them for once?
We can.
They
I
looked
was
good
actually happy
offensively
you
for a
guys.
little bit. They played really good defense. That's really the group that I'm excited about. The defense looks phenomenal. The only thing that I really still have a lot of concerns about is the pass rush.
Yeah.
I think our secondary is playing really, really well right now. I think our linebackers are playing well. I think our defensive line that are stuffing the run right now are playing really well. I mean, Amir Abdullah had 5 carries, 42 yards. He had a long one that he broke on there.
Shout out Javonte Williams, too.
Javonte Williams looked good in this game. Held Alexander Madison to 15 carries on 2.5 a carry.
That's wild.
That's exactly what we're
Shout
liking
out
to see.
Patrick Surtain with the
Hey,
100-yard pick six.
and 2 to go with that, and the first white cornerback to get a pick in 16 years. Riley Moss, baby.
Way to go, guys.
Hey,
Way to go.
and I love that kid. And I think he's going to be really, really good throughout this. Not even just a funny, he's a good white cornerback, but he actually has been playing really, really well to start this year, and he's been really impactful. So that's the part that I'm excited about. I hope to see the offense get a little bit better, maybe get Bo Nix to throw the ball a little bit more down the field. But I think it's going to be a good team.
I'm glad that you're excited, but are you more excited about your 3 Ws?
I am more excited about my 3 Ws because I have 3 sweet groups to talk about. Now, I went a little bit back and forth. I talked about the Ravens run game last week, so shout out to them again. I went to the other side of it this week. Jamar Chase. Oh, my God. This is partially an apology to Joe Burrow and a partially apology to Jamar Chase because I
did
thought
it
they were going to be
again.
good. Now, I will say I was right that they're not good. They're not winning games right now. They have 1 win on the season. And they're basically almost eliminated from the playoffs, virtue of nobody has ever started this poorly and made the playoffs.
Yeah.
But Jamar Chase is still an animal, and I think that in certain settings, if he were to do this more consistently, he'd be in the conversation with Justin Jefferson, the CeeDee Lambs. He just doesn't have the consistency right now.
My question is to you, what is the problem with the Cincinnati Bengals?
Just a lot. They have, I mean, if we look at this game right now, they played probably the perfect game they could offensively.
Yeah.
But the defense sucked. What was the problem the first 3 weeks? The defense was playing phenomenally, but the offense wasn't there right away. So now we've just completely flipped the script on what we are and who we are and what we do. It makes no sense to me right now. And Joe Burrow's back and throwing long balls and looks really good, but are you going to start beating teams that are pretty poor? Maybe. Are you going to be able to beat playoff teams that have a full roster that's really good? Probably not. Your secondary has not played very well throughout the year. I don't think that you have a lot of depth in the back half. I think that they're missing different spots in different places.
With the stat you just gave us about the whole playoff contention, do you see this team coming back and making the playoff?
No. And I said this at the beginning of the year, I don't think they're making the playoffs. I don't think that they're going to be very good this year
I think
because
it's
of
just hard.
Yeah.
Just because of Lamar.
you set yourself up like this every year. We've talked about this a couple times. You can't just take the first month of football off and expect it to go well. This has worked out for Joe Burrow a couple times now, and it's just not going to continue to happen if you want it to be like that. I'm going to move on because I digress from that. A group that is playing out of their minds right now defensively, Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean,
Patrick Mahomes has not been good.
No, not at all.
Let's just call a spade a spade. Patrick Mahomes has as many touchdown passes as he does picks. If that's what Alan Bowman was doing here, we'd be very, very upset, which we are already.
We
He
are
only has
upset.
4. Yeah, but they're still winning. They're still playing well. And what's the point to that? It's their defense. Dude, Chris Jones is an animal. Trent McDuffie's awesome. Nick Bolton is one of the best linebackers in the NFL. Justin Reed's an awesome safety. They just have so many pieces on that defense that are so good.
Well, it used to be the script flipped right here because Kansas City, they felt like they had to score every single drive when they had Tyreek Hill and Kareem Hunt. But now, because their defense was terrible, now they have a great defense to where now if you give up a turnover or have to do a couple more punts, you're still able to. Just because Andy Reid has a play call for pretty much every defense. I mean, essentially every coach does, but just the mastermind that he's been able to do, especially even when there's times where Mahomes is not playing well, has just been great. And obviously Kansas City now is still undefeated, I believe.
They are.
Or I didn't know if they dropped
One of the only two teams in the NFL to be undefeated, them in Minnesota.
And that's just with the coaching and with the defense. So, yeah, it's obviously concerning with Mahomes because I believe he's number one when it comes to turnovers. But, I think they'll be able to shape it out. Hopefully Travis can be able to bounce back a little bit because it's still kind of rough for him, especially with him being on my fantasy.
They feel like the one team right now that is inevitably going to win. You don't know how it's going to look. You don't know exactly the game plan that's going in. You don't even know if it's going to look pretty for them. You just have a feeling at the end of the game they're going to have more points than their opponent somehow, some way. Whether that's Mahomes playing phenomenally at the end of the game, your defense showing for the entire game, it just feels inevitable at certain points, which is really frustrating for this Broncos fan.
Even the game, like, it's ugly football I've seen from Kansas City. I'm like, I don't know how they're going to win this or even like play this in the playoffs, and they still somehow find a way to win the game. Now, granted, some of them were kind of weaker teams, but also some big teams.
Yeah.
So,
The final group that I had was Lumen Field, which Soldier Field. The group, the boys, sorry, not Lumen Field, sorry, Soldier Field. The Bears, baby. They look like they have a good offense, and it's progressively gotten better. That's what I really want to see out of a rookie quarterback like Caleb Williams.
I don't care if it was against Carolina.
Exactly. I want to see you start throwing those touchdowns. But here's my point. Here's why I brought it into that stadium. Not only did they play at home last week against the Panthers, they play at home this week against the Jaguars for a real chance to get into a spot where you're above 500 for the first time in a long time.
Very long.
I can't imagine Chicago being more excited. That would be a like the division race is already going to be awesome. I'm going to be really curious to see where Chicago slots in because I think Caleb is just getting better and better and better with those receiving weapons.
I think so too. I just don't think it's their year quite yet. I think that next year, the next offseason, I think we'll start to.
Well, what's crazy about this division is that everybody felt like they were pretty comfortable putting them in a specific order. Vikings were going to be last, the Bears were going to be next, the Packers were going to be next, and then the Lions were going to be next. Well, now the Vikings, who were supposed to be at the bottom, are now 5-0. The Packers are still very good. The Lions are still Super Bowl contenders for sure. They've only lost one game, and the Bears are 500. So it's like, are they even 500 at this point? I'm pretty sure they're above 500.
Now, I know we don't have them on the notes here, but I want to surprise you with this question right here.
Go for it.
With the Vikings being able to have this great run, with J.J. McCarthy being back, do you see him being the starter? Or is Sam Darnold the guy?
I think this depends on two things here. Number one, can it be sustained long enough to get in the playoffs and actually compete in the playoffs? And number two, is he making your top receivers happy? Because there's two things that are happening here right now. He's winning games, and he's looked good, and he looks like he's been playing like an elite-level quarterback in certain spots. The yardage isn't really there. You can tell that Kevin O'Connell is specifically trying to lure him back in and kind of reel him in and make him more of that game manager. And I wonder if they get to camp next year and they say, okay, we liked what we got out of Sam this last year, but maybe it didn't get us the ceiling that we want to be at. What if we put in a guy like JJ, especially because you just spent a first-round pick on him?
But isn't that what you were kind of looking for with JJ, just being a game manager?
In some degree, I think that he's looking more like. I also think that there's different degrees of game manager, and
Plus, you got to think JJ's contract is cheaper.
exactly, you're also getting the rookie scale deal, whereas Sam Darnold's going to be asking for a lot of money probably next year. Yeah. He's going to want to get paid right away. Part of the issue with this too is that I think that if you're looking at just the higher ups and how things logistically have to happen, I'm assuming the owners are going to want JJ to play.
Yeah.
They're going to want him in the game over a guy like Sam Darnold, who wasn't their franchise guy. And so I think the politics might have hurt him a little bit as well. But I do overall think that it will be JJ's team eventually. I just think for this right now, ride the wave as long as you can and enjoy it.
Fair enough. I'll give you that one.
Hey, and we got to look at a few games that are coming up this week. We'll talk about the game that's currently going on because we're filming a little bit later. I don't even know if we want to do a full pick segment over it. It's not looking good so far. I'll just say that right now.
I haven't checked the score yet on Seattle.
The Commanders versus the Ravens this week. I think this is going to be such a good game, and nobody saw it coming. Well, because everybody thought the Commanders were going to be bad. Boy. And Jaden Daniels is a real MVP candidate.
He is at the moment, yeah, without a doubt.
If you were making a team right now, this conversation has been brought up a lot with different quarterbacks. Where do you slot him? Like, who is he in between, do you think? Like, what range? If I say Josh Allen, are you trading Jaden Daniels? Who would you rather start with right now?
Right now, I'd rather start with Jaden Daniels.
Okay. See, this is what I'm saying, because the age plays a factor too. And I think that he's going to be such a phenomenal player for years to come. I think there will be a slip-up game coming up here soon, so I'd probably take the Ravens in this one, especially at home.
I'd
trying
take
to,
Baltimore, too.
yeah.
There's very few quarterbacks I'd pick over Jaden Daniels, but if it's just like if I'm thinking long term here when it comes to it, I'm picking Jaden Daniels regardless.
Yep. San Fran versus Seattle, we're talking about a little bit right now. San Fran's up 13-0. I think
Better
they're
than what I expected.
yeah, they're a very interesting team right now. They're missing a lot of their best players, but their scheme is still so good that it doesn't truly matter all that much. So I'll be curious to see. Seattle's kind of on a skid right now. They need to get back onto the winning ways. They just lost to New York last week, and for a team that wants to have playoff aspirations, you can't have losses like that and then lose the next week at home. So we'll see if they can start bouncing back. It's still pretty early in that game. There's still 9 minutes left.
Now we have some time here, so we get to talk about another game. We have the Lions versus the Cowboys.
Dude, I think the Lions are going to roll them.
Me too.
Well,
I got the Lions.
The thing more than anything, not even with Dak, it's the defense for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
I really think the Steelers' offense is bad, and I think that watching them walk up and down the field was an awesome thing for them to do. I think the Lions are going to steamroll the Cowboys. Give me the Lions by 2 scores.
Honestly, me too. I think the Lions are going to be able to do whatever they want, especially with that running game, and just they have better receivers than what Pittsburgh had, and just a lot better offense when it came schematically. And
Do you know who doesn't feel like they're in a spot where they're feeling like they can do whatever they want?
Who?
Robert Saleh. He just got fired, and we're going to have to talk about that. And who else may be on the hot seat
about to
right
find
after
out.
this.
Of the food scene in Tulsa, and I've loved to see the way it's evolved over the years, and I'm glad to be part of it.
My name's Kevin Kyle. I'm the executive chef. I started here, the idea was to do something local. Everything that we try to do has Oklahoma products.
Tulsa is a big oil boom when we were the oil capital in the early 1900s. How Route 66 put Tulsa on the map. And the menu around that was, well, what would an oil worker take out in their lunchbox? That's how Prospect kind of came from.
We never get crazy busy, so we can do a lot of different things with food. And we can do things like wine dinners and have local dinners. We have a private dining room that people can come.
I think being at the heart of the old Route 66 has kind of weighed into us getting a lot of different things brought in from different areas of the United States. When I taste something on our menu for the first time, the first thing I go is, that's Tulsa.
Our state is one of the most beautiful and unique states in the USA. With diverse geographies, the historic Route 66, unforgettable restaurants, and some of the greatest people on the planet. With so much to see and so much to do, living in Oklahoma means one of the best vacation spots is right in our own backyard. Doesn't this story need to be told? As filmmakers and photographers based right here in Oklahoma, we thought so. And hey, who doesn't like a good road trip? So, we packed up our cameras, teamed up with Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell and the Oklahoma Tourism and Recreation Department, and that's how this series was born. We want to show you why traveling within the great state of Oklahoma is a great idea. So come join us for thousands of miles over the next year, from Broken Bow to Black Mesa. This is the Oklahoma Road Trip.
Pecans.
Final segment. We're back.
Fourth quarter, baby.
Fourth quarter, and we got to talk about some people that may or may not be coaching in the fourth quarter coming up quite soon here. Robert Saleh lost his job this week, pretty early on. Aaron Rodgers says he had absolutely nothing to do with it, and as with everything else with Aaron Rodgers, I completely agree with him and will not question what's going on.
Same. I totally agree with Aaron Rodgers here. I think he's just
Come on,
an
man.
innocent man. And, he just wants to play football. Certainly, there's no other allegations or anything else that's about to come in there. Certainly, he doesn't care about the media. He just likes football. He's a football guy. And there's nothing else to it.
I can't
Why
stand
would he
Aaron
have anything
Rodgers.
with Robert Saleh?
I can't stand him because there's no way on earth that you're going to admit to having a conversation with the owner and the GM the night before the guy got fired and go, yeah, I didn't come up in conversation. Are you serious?
There's also
How
been-
dumb do you think the people in New York are, Aaron?
Yeah,
I know you haven't been there for very long. You were there for the full year last year to see the media. How dumb do you think the media is out there in New York?
Jets are going to jet.
Because it's just hilarious to me to watch them in this situation right now. Robert Saleh, I think, is the perfect example of a coach that just fits his role correctly. He's a phenomenal defensive coordinator, and I think that will always be true, like a Wade Phillips type of guy that won the Broncos Super Bowl.
I
And
like Saleh, yeah.
there's just certain guys that you can only hit a certain point in your career.
That's kind of the same with Kingsbury.
Exactly. You hit a certain point of being an offensive coordinator, of being a defensive coordinator, and that is what your best role is for. Some guys are just not made to be head coaches, and I think Robert Saleh is kind of fitting into that. I think whoever gets him as their defensive coordinator next year is going to be lucky, and they're going to be really, really excited to have him on their staff, but you can't hire him again as a head coach. He doesn't seem like the leader of men.
Now, there's one thing. There is a report that I want to go by Kimberly A. Martin from ESPN. So, Sauce Gardner, who deleted social media, said, Robert Saleh changed my life. That's why every year he texts them on his B-Day saying that he appreciates them. Gardner said it still feels weird even today about the firing. And he said, if I'm being honest, we're doing it for him still.
Can I tell you the funniest response to that?
What's that?
Makai Becton's Twitter. That dude posting the giant dude in the suit and like pimping out about it and then deleting it 20 minutes later was pretty hilarious.
Now, there are talks, too, that Nathaniel Hackett has also been relieved from play calling duties as well.
Which needed to be done before they fired Saleh, but here we are now figuring it out. So I think the biggest thing with this team right now is how to fix the offense, which I don't know if that's going to be fixed at this point. You hired a moron of an offensive coordinator, and I can say that as a Denver Broncos fan. I don't talk trash a whole lot about NFL coordinators and people that make a lot of money doing this stuff. They know a lot more than me, and Nathaniel Hackett does too, but he's still an idiot. Because I've watched that man run a team into the ground now at this point, and he's still got a job after that. There is no way you can convince me that man is good at play calling or knows what he's doing. So I'm good on that one. I honestly, for me, this moves the Jets like out of playoff contention entirely.
Same,
I think
especially
they're
because
done.
it was still up for grabs for the division just because of Miami tanking and the Patriots not playing well.
They may have the 1 week bounce back where they have the interim coach because that always seems to be a
that
thing.
always happens.
But I just don't see it going well for them the rest of the season throughout this.
Neither do I. I just don't like how it was this early. I think it should have been it should have been end of season type thing.
Yeah, and I think what's hard about that is that he didn't have a starting quarterback, so you can't fire him last year.
Yeah.
That's just based on the principle of we brought in this guy to fix the offense. You're supposed to have the defense. The defense was phenomenal last year, and the offense sucked. So it's like, okay, once we get the quarterback in, it'll be fixed and everything else. Problem this year is that the offense has still sucked, and the defense has been actually much worse.
Yeah.
Their pass rush is not there at all. They don't have the players they did up front anymore, and I think that the biggest issue that they have is Jets are going to Jets, man. They don't have the quarterback play. I hate to say it. 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers is not playing well enough to be a good, high-level starting quarterback. Is he still a good starting quarterback? Yes. Is he going to win you games on his own like he did in Green Bay? No.
Because, talent-wise, this is the best Jets team since they had Le'Veon Bell and Mosley and all them. And this was nowhere close to their expectations at all. So
No, but that's also what the Jets are going to do, is miss expectations and not hit what they were supposed to do in the first place. Now, with that being said, Robert Saleh has already lost his job. That spot's already over. We need to look at a few other guys around the league that could possibly be losing their jobs either in the near future or towards the end of the season. Do we like them personally? Do we want them to stay? Why or why not? So, we're going to run through a few different coaches here, and we're going to talk about why or why not we think that they should be staying with their current team. Dave Canales, the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, former offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think for so many reasons you don't fire this guy.
I think the only reason why you fire him is just so out of pity and just put him in a better spot.
This is what I was saying. Like, is it not insane to think that David Tepper would blame this on Dave Canales and get to a point? Like, should he be fired? No. Could he be fired? Absolutely. Because he did it with Frank Reich last year, and that was not Frank Reich's fault.
It's just interesting, too, because it went from how Bryce was the man, and now they're like, well, we had to take Andy Dalton out just to protect them. So you don't even know who they're really prioritizing when it comes to quarterbacks.
Are you going to draft another quarterback next year?
Yeah,
and
I was
if
gonna
so,
ask, are you going to draft another one? Are you going to sign a guy? Or are you
also, I heard this from a bunch of people at this point. What do you think the value of Bryce Young is on the open market? Do you think it's an actual
Like
first-round pick?
pick-wise?
Yeah. Do you think you get a first-round pick for Bryce Young?
I think high third at the moment.
Yeah, this is what I was saying. Everybody that's talking about you can still get a first-round pick for Bryce Young. Guys, I think the NFL is so much attained to like a car dealership. When it's fresh off the lot as a rookie, he's worth as much as he's going to be worth in that moment, unless it becomes more valuable by himself. It becomes, let's say, an antique car for this example on this. But for 90% of the people, you're a Honda. You're walking out there, you're going to be as good as you're going to get when you get out there on day one, and your value is only going to diminish exponentially as you go because of your age and how much wear and tear you have on you. He has proven that he doesn't be a high-level starting quarterback. They've now shown that they've had to bench him for Andy Dalton. I don't care what the reason is behind it. You're not getting a first-round pick for that guy.
You're not getting a first-round pick from him. We can agree on that.
Yeah.
I know we've had our differences when it comes to Bryce.
We do.
And so honestly, he's not worth a first round or even a second round pick at the moment, just because the tape shows he's not there at the moment. He's not confident. He's still not really of size, so it's not like he's a 6'4" or like 215-pound quarterback. He's still a tiny guy, and so yeah, he's worth around a third round pick at the moment. Now, he did play well whenever he got in for Chicago. He had a beautiful throw right there on the run, but we're gonna have to see more than that if he wants to be worth a first round pick.
So I wanna look at something real quick because I think the most comparable thing that we can look at for this is the Josh Rosen trade.
Yeah.
But I still even think Josh Rosen had a little bit better of a resume in there because he at least started 10 games his first year and he was still being the starter when they were looking to shop him.
And I think people gave him the benefit of the doubt because that was an interim head coach and they had absolutely no talent at the time.
Yep.
So, and plus they kind of knew that he wasn't developing right, and so they're like, well, Kyler's going to be on the board regardless at one.
Now they got the very last pick or second to last pick in the second round that year, and they also got a way down the future 5th round pick.
Yeah.
Could I see it being kind of close to that? Yeah, that's what I think that's kind of the range we're talking about. Early 3rd, late 2nd, something else maybe on top of it.
5th.
But if you're thinking that you're getting a first round pick for a guy that has shown that he can't be a high level quarterback in the NFL, you're out of your mind.
My question is, where would Bryce go?
That is a really good question, but
We can't talk about that now.
I can't talk about that right now because I got to talk about a coach that I do think should have been fired 3 years ago. This is going to be my new Brandon Staley. I hope you know. If for people who didn't listen to the podcast last year that we had, I hate Brandon Staley. I've always hated Brandon Staley. I think he's a god-awful coach. I don't know if he knows what he's doing at any point or time. I think he had one of the most talented rosters in the AFC last year, and I think he squandered it every chance he got. And hey, we're back with Mike McCarthy. Same guy who's doing the same thing. Now, let's be honest here. We know what Mike McCarthy is. He's going to get you to the playoffs. He's not going to win a lot of playoff games. He may have an occasional run if he has a high-level quarterback like he did with Aaron Rodgers that one year. But we know what Mike McCarthy's play calling is going to be. He's never going to be on the high level as a Sean McVay, a Kyle Shanahan. He's never going to be near any of those guys. I'm going to put Kevin O'Connell up there right now just because of how good he's been as an offensive coordinator for them and head coach. But Mike McCarthy, dude, like you can't do what you're doing right now and expect to be any higher spot, especially with Dallas right now and Jerry Jones. I just feel like the volatility of it is going to get to them, and he's going to be the scapegoat this year when things go wrong.
Especially because every year when we talk about the Cowboys, we think that they're going to have this fall off, or like we're not really sure when this fall off of when they're going to be back to being terrible again. But then every year they keep getting more talent and better players, and so McCarthy has to get to the AFC Championship or something here. The fact that he keeps losing in the wild card or divisional, like that's not going to work with Jerry.
Yep, and then part of it too is right now is you're getting past the hill of paying these guys. You had your young roster 3 years ago.
Yeah.
When you had Micah on his rookie deal, when you had Dak on the smaller deal that you had, when you had CD on his rookie deal, when you had all these dudes on rookie deals, you could keep bringing in more and more pieces. And now that you're starting to pay all these guys, you haven't even paid Micah Parsons yet.
No.
So it's like, okay, this team's only going to continue to lose talent, which means they're going to have to rely more on their head coach and coordinators to elevate the talent that is there and draft picks that are there. I just think it becomes an equation where Mike McCarthy's no longer going to fit the situation very well, and he's not going to be the person for him. Somebody that, shout out one of our great TDs here, Devin Bloomer, would like to see fired. Doug Peterson. He's a big Jags fan. I'll just shout out Devin.
They just looked awful. I mean, that offense is not it. It's Doug Peterson's. It's not the same as what it was in Philly.
Nope.
It's clearly just toss and turn. Lawrence doesn't even seem confident. Nothing's running well. That defense is the only thing that's helping them somewhat. And yeah, I think he's got to be in the hot seat in this situation.
Now, I will say, they got their first win of the year last week. They got the first win of the year last week, 37-34 against the Colts.
Yeah.
That still raises so many questions for me that you can't play defense. Your offense has looked bad for a while, and they finally showed up and played really well. Trevor Lawrence, 371 and 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Tank Bigsby, 13 for 101 and 2 touchdowns. What I think is going to be more important than anything with this team is the development of Trevor Lawrence. And what sounds so dumb about this is that we're almost forgotten where the Jags have come from and where the Browns have come from. And we haven't had a true, well, you know what's weird too is we haven't had a true poverty franchise in the NFL for a couple years now. There hasn't been somebody like, yes, there have been teams that have gotten really, really bad. The Miami team, the tank for Tua, the last year Bears team. Like there have been really bad teams. Yeah. But there have not been the 0-16 to 1-15 Browns. Yeah. There has not been a level where the Jaguars were a couple years ago when they had 3 first-round picks in a row. Yeah. I just think that it gets to a point right now where, hey, the expectation needs to be set higher for the Jags team, and I wonder if they fire him. It's an in-between spot for me. I don't know if they should fire him, if they shouldn't. It kind of depends on how the rest of the season goes.
Didn't they hire him last year or the year before?
2 years ago now.
2 years ago now. Yeah, no, I mean the 3-year rule for me. So yeah, if he's not able to do much, get him
Yep.
out of there. 'cause-
If he can't go farther than what he did last year, which was a playoff win. So, and right now they're not in place at all to make the playoffs, which I think will be a really interesting race in a division that I don't think they're catching up in, man.
I don't think
The Texans are so good, and the Colts are going to be just fine once they get AR-15 back, and they're just not going to be able to catch up with these guys.
It's really sad because I really was rooting for Lawrence, and right now I feel like his talent's just kind of getting wasted. He kind of reminds me of another version of Andrew Luck,
Yep.
but just blonde.
But he's also just, I don't think he's as good as that. But
He's not
we can have that
talented.
conversation for another day.
He's
We
not
got
as talented as
No.
Andrew Luck. I'll say that.
We got 3 coaches, and we got 2 minutes to do it. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on this one because I think hard no on this one. Antonio Pierce.
I don't think he should be fired.
I don't think he should be fired either. First year as a head coach, I think that he's bought in the locker room. That locker room loves him, and I think that they'll get better as they go with it. The other one that I really want to look at here, Nick Sirianni, is the big one here that we need to have a small conversation about. Well, actually, let's just talk about Kevin Stefanski real quick. It's not his fault that his quarterback's a complete and utter moron, and he's stuck with him, and his owner's a complete and utter moron for continuously needing to run this guy out there. It's not him who's the problem.
The only reason why I put Kevin Stefanski is just knowing how terrible the Browns organization is. They would choose Watson over Stefanski.
Oh, they have to at this point. They still do for 2 years. They still have to choose him for 2 years right now, and I think that's a complete joke. But on the actual serious topic that I think we can kind of talk a little bit more about for this minute, Nick Sirianni with the Eagles. I think this is the season. If they do not make the Super Bowl again this year, he's done.
He's got to be. I think so.
Which is such a weird dynamic between where different organizations are. We were just done talking about the Jags and how if you get to the playoffs and win a playoff game, it's awesome. But if you're with the Eagles, man, you need to step these things up and be the leader that these guys have, especially with the cracks already showing with this team.
Yeah,
So
I mean, because we saw with that Super Bowl run, it was great and all, but then the next couple of years, we've just seen they've been playing down to other teams' levels and just been able to with these struggle wins. And then we get to the playoffs and they just get flat out exposed. So it's like that kind of relies on Nick Sirianni. So,
Yep.
I don't know, man. There's a whole lot of coaches. I mean, with a very little list, it's just so confusing where these guys are going to, how these guys are going to be, or where they're going to end up.
For sure.
And who's going to replace them. That's another thing. And we couldn't even get to that.
We can't get to all that right now, and I don't think we're going to have the time on this show to do so, but we appreciate you guys listening to our show. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, listen on Spotify, add a like on there if you can. Listen to anything else going on the OCast if you have the time for that as well. We'll be back next week with a little bit more NFL content for you and college football and everything else in between. So,
also,
until
call your
then,
mom.
call your mom, enjoy your day. Have a good one, guys.
See you guys.
Pecans are staple to Oklahoma. In fact, many of our native pecans come from trees that are older than Oklahoma statehood.
My father's the one that got us started into the pecan picking. I was probably 10 or 12 years old, and we started off with one little mechanical picker that you pulled behind a four-wheeler. Then we'd go home at night and we'd clean them on a TV tray. I guess watching my dad work hard when we were young, and people started trusting him and getting more and more groves, we just kept growing.
Being a relatively new and fresh company, we get to sit in the same room with people who have been a part of the Oklahoma economy for decades.
It's opened a lot of doors. It's gave us quite a bit of exposure, and I think people, will take a small company like us a little more serious. We're just going to continue growing as long as our community lets us and our customers keep on buying, and we'll see where it takes us.
Thank you for coming to Stay and Play Pet Resort. This is where we can board your pet at any time for your convenience and make them feel at home. We have 5 different kennels for your pet. We have luxury suites that come with TV, camera, fireplace, and the webcam is at your free. We have Kitty City where you can board your cat for multiple different prices. Stay and Play Pet Resort offers a free chauffeur service. If you go to Baker Animal Clinic, you can drop your pet off anywhere between 7:30 a.m. and no later than 8 a.m. Stay and Play Pet Resort offers a game day sports package. For $37, you can drop your dog off during the game day as early as 7:30 in the morning. Policy state,